From the largest and most mysterious primates that ever walked the earth to the buried remains of ancient giants in the middle of California, find out if giants really did exist. The Gigantopithecus. There are a lot of clues that say giants could have existed on Earth many years ago. Take the Gigantopithecus, for example. This was the largest primate that ever walked around on our planet, but it actually went extinct because it was too enormous. This has led some people to speculate that giant humans could have also gone extinct for the same reason. According to Live Science, we don't actually know all that much about the Gigantopithecus, other than that it weighed around 600 pounds, stood 10 feet tall, and went extinct because they had a limited diet and couldn't get enough food. We also know that these ancient primal giants are a very distant relative of orangutans. While this is not definitive proof that giants once walked the world, it also kind of is. You see, this enormous primate lived exclusively in the forest until its habitat began to shrink around 100,000 years ago. As a result, it no longer was able to find enough food to survive and reproduce, and it eventually went extinct. The first time the Gigantopithecus became known was in 1935 when a German paleontologist found its molars in a pharmacy in China where they were being labeled and sold as dragon teeth. Because as we all know, dragon teeth are the only way to fix your personal health problems. But anyway, thanks to the teeth, scientists have learned a lot about the ancient giant primate. But there have actually been no skulls or skeletons found of the Gigantopithecus, only teeth and pieces of jawbones, which means other giant man-beasts could have roamed the earth, we just have not found their bones. Roman giant. Just recently in Rome, a new giant was found. Even by today's standards, considering we are quite a bit taller than our ancient ancestors, 6 feet 8 inches tall is a pretty incredible feat. Even some of the tallest basketball players are not that tall. And in Rome during the 3rd century AD, average men only reached about 5'6", which makes average men today look basically like giants. The fact that a skeleton has been found from Roman times with a striking height of 6 feet 8 inches is simply incredible. According to a report from the Daily Mail, archaeologists believe that they have discovered the first complete skeleton of an ancient person who had gigantism. This happened near the city of Rome while excavating a necropolis. Gigantism is very rare. It's rare these days, only affecting about 3 out of every million people. To find a skeleton with gigantism from ancient times is basically unheard of. There have been 2 partial skeletons discovered throughout the years that could have had gigantism, one in Egypt and one in Poland. However, scientists believe the skeleton they found in Rome is a definitive case of gigantism and cannot be anything else. But who's to say gigantism isn't just a lost trait passed down from our ancient giant ancestors? As you may know, gigantism is a condition that leads to excessive growth way beyond the human average. This happens because of an overproduction of growth hormones in childhood. Just think about that for a second. If it's possible for human beings to produce so many growth hormones and grow to be giants, who's to say we weren't giants before? The giants of Death Valley. According to ancient legends, Death Valley in California is actually concealing an ancient subterranean city of giants. Most of us are probably familiar with Death Valley. It is the most inhospitable place on Earth with an average temperature of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There's basically no water, vegetation is not in abundance, and the whole area is dangerously below sea level. But if the Native American legends are to be believed, there is an underground kingdom located underneath the desert sands. Even though the area around Death Valley truly is horrendous, it has not stopped Native Americans from living there for centuries, long before the white man showed up. And they actually have legends that say Death Valley is a land of ghosts, and that inside the subterranean city is a portal to the underworld. They have all kinds of legends about Death Valley, but most archaeologists won't even go to check the place out. It's simply never been dug up before. There are some strange tales of prospectors and miners from the early 20th century stumbling upon underground passages and finding the mummies of giants and huge statues, but none of it has ever been substantiated. There could be proof of life and giants under the cracked salt plains of Death Valley, but also there might be nothing. Ethiopian giants. Archaeologists in Ethiopia uncovered an ancient city just recently in 2017. In a report from the BBC, archaeologists claim that they have discovered a city in eastern Ethiopia filled with artifacts from Egypt, India, and China. The city's name is Harla, and the artifacts found are proof that the old Abyssinian Empire was indeed a serious center for trade in the ancient world all the way into the 10th century. But forget about what the archaeologists found for just a minute. There is actually a local myth that says that the area was once occupied by giants. The locals claim that because the settlement buildings were constructed with stone blocks that were so large and so heavy that no ordinary people could have lifted them, it was undoubtedly giants who had occupied the place. And even though the stuffy scientists have disproved the local myth of giants, claiming it to be impossible, the local people still believe it. And why not? The oldest hominin fossil ever discovered was just north of this region. The Queen of Sheba lived close by. The Ark of the Covenant is still sitting in a compound just up the street in Aksum. Why couldn't there have been giants living in Ethiopia thousands of years ago? Robert Wadlow. If we're going to be talking about giants, Robert Wadlow must be added to the list. You probably recognize Robert as the tallest man in medical history. He is the irrefutable giant that lived. He was actually born at 6:30 in the morning in Illinois on the 22nd of February 1918. When he was last measured on June 27, 1940, Robert was 8 feet 11 inches tall. He was literally 1 inch away from being 9 feet. That's a pretty good size for a giant if you ask me. Is this proof of giants existing? Well, maybe not and maybe yes. The simple fact that a human man can grow to be about 9 feet tall says a lot about our DNA and our own potential. Of course, Robert actually had a pretty difficult life. He died in a hotel room as a result of a septic blister on his right ankle. He weighed just about 440 pounds at the time of his death, and according to Guinness World Records, Robert ate about 8,000 calories per day. That's over 3 times the recommended serving for an average adult. Being around 3 feet taller than everyone else around you could not have been a lot of fun. Imagine how many "how's the weather up there" jokes you would have to put up with. Since Robert, there has not been another person born who even comes close to breaking his record. He is certainly an anomaly, but this is definitive proof that giants can exist and have existed. Perhaps not in large numbers, but they have definitely walked across the planet. Giant footprints. Speaking of walking across the planet, there is supposedly a giant footprint in the Pingyan village of Guizhou province in China. It was allegedly discovered in 2016, and taking a good look at it, the photos you can see, it's definitely the footprint of a very large human. By local reports, the footprint found pressed into the stone was around 22 inches long. That is significantly longer than any normal person's foot. The only issue with this story is that there is not a whole lot of authentication. Sure, there are some photos of a giant footprint, and there were some vague reports that the footprint was dated back to the prehistoric era, but unfortunately, this just cannot be verified. There is no reputable source, and there are no reputable pictures. And this brings us to the second giant footprint you may have seen online. This one was found somewhere in Africa and is claimed to be 200 million years old. The footprint is also roughly the size of a human man, but the weird thing about this one is that it's the wrong side up. The giant would have had to kick the footprint sideways into the stone. Then nobody found it for thousands and thousands of years. Unfortunately, these giant footprints aren't much evidence of anything except conspiracy theories. The Nephilim. Most of you out there have probably heard of the Nephilim. They were a strange group of giant people, also sometimes known as the sons of God and the daughters of men, who supposedly lived before the Great Flood. They are supposed to be the result of the fallen sons of God reproducing with the daughters of Adam. The Nephilim are referred to in several religious texts, including Genesis and Ezekiel. In Hebrew, the word Nephilim is sometimes translated directly as giants, but despite the Nephilim appearing in so many religious texts, many scholars are unsure the exact nature of the supposed giants and whether or not they were indeed real. The issue with religious texts is that everything is up for interpretation, and trying to pinpoint the accuracy of a legend after several thousand years is a disastrous game of phone tag. Some believe the great size of the Nephilim was metaphorical, and other people take it more literally. But the main point is that the Bible spoke of giants living on Earth. Now, is that proof? Well, that's for you to decide. The Lost City of Giants. Just a few years ago, there was an incredible discovery made deep in the Ecuadorian jungle. Researchers discovered the remains of a massive structure that is now being called the Lost City of Giants. This enormous place was found in a region where local legends claim a race of giant humans once lived. It's pretty incredible, as the old structure that was found has 260-foot walls and doorways that suggest the existence of extremely tall people. There were allegedly also giant tools found in the vicinity that looked way too big to be used by normal people. A researcher based in Ecuador actually believes that the structure belonged to an unknown culture that lived in the area before the Inca. This could very well have been a city, or at least a place of worship dominated by giants of the jungle. However, because of its precarious location very far from the nearest town through dense and mountainous jungle, almost nobody is willing to explore it. And for this reason, there has not been enough research done since the recent discovery. It's one of those mysteries that is still up in the air, and we might not know the truth of the Lost City of Giants until a legitimate team of researchers gets down there and starts digging around. The giants of the Amazon. Here is another story shrouded in mystery, also from Ecuador. As reported in Archaeology World, a British research team uncovered extremely tall skeletons in the Amazon region of both Ecuador and Peru. Roughly half a dozen human skeletons were found from the early 1400s that were between 7 feet and 8 feet in height. This would make them very close to being real-life giants. According to one of the researchers, they are still looking into the exact origins of the skeletons and didn't want to make any claims based on speculation. Because the skeletons are so enormous, they could have some serious implications on life in the jungle hundreds and hundreds of years ago. As you can imagine, this is a pretty controversial area of research. No modern scientist wants to admit that giants could have been living in the jungle 600 years ago. And in this case, we might just have to wait a little longer for research to be completed. But what is a little startling about these skeletons is that their joints all appeared completely healthy. Researchers also claimed that one of the skeletons they found was a female who was about 60 years old when she died. This would make her much older than most people who have a case of gigantism, which suggests these ancient 8-foot-tall peoples didn't have a disease at all and were just naturally giant. The Kentucky Dover Mound. Last on the list for today is the Kentucky Dover Mound. It all started in the 1800s when reports began to come in that a discovery had been made of extremely large skeletons all buried under mounds of dirt in North America. The skeletons were supposedly between 7 and 8 feet tall, very much like the skeletons discovered recently in Ecuador. There were even a few skeletons discovered that were between 9 and 11 feet, having extremely large skulls and enormous lower jawbones. These skeletons are believed to have belonged to the Adena people, who could have been an extremely rare and unique form of human living in West Virginia. Apparently, some of the skeletons found in the Kentucky Dover Mounds also had elongated skulls that were greatly deformed. If all the reports and research from the 1800s and early 1900s is to be believed, there was definitely a race of giant people living in North America way before Europeans arrived. The biggest question is, why is this not talked about more, and why is any information on the subject so hard to find? Why is this research being discreetly buried, and why do modern scientists refuse to talk about the legitimate truth of our giant ancestors? Then again, maybe the skeletons found at the Kentucky Dover Mound weren't that big to begin with, and we have been lied to. The truth may be more confusing than we know, but if giants did truly exist, it looks like they existed from North America and down into the jungles of the Amazon. And this begs another question: why did giants exist in the Americas and not in Europe or in Asia? Do you believe that giants walked the earth? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. From a mysterious black tomb to a bizarre ancient cult that worshipped a snake god, here are 10 recent archaeological discoveries from Egypt. Untouched mummies. It seems like there is a never-ending supply of mummies in Egypt. Everywhere you turn, there's a mummy under the ground just waiting to be uncovered. One of the more recent discoveries actually revealed 14 new mummies that had gone untouched for over 2,500 years in a tomb in Saqqara. What makes this such an alarming recent discovery is that it happened in the middle of the pandemic. After such an already turbulent year, people all over the world sounded off their opinions about leaving these coffins closed. While science is pretty skeptical about curses and magic, that did not stop lots of people from speaking out against the ancient coffins, saying it would be a bad idea to open them because 2020 had been a horrible year already. What if one of the coffins contained a plague? What if one of the coffins contained a curse that could potentially end the world? Of course, neither of those things were likely to happen, and Egyptologists were excited that such an amazing discovery happened during such hard times. The coffins really were quite impressive. The paint was still perfect, the faces were recognizable, and all 14 were some of the most exquisitely preserved sarcophagi ever brought out of the ground. What's even more incredible about these coffins is that they were discovered only 10 miles south of the Giza pyramids. How in the world did everyone miss these buried treasures for so long? Mysterious Black Tomb. One of the most recent Egyptian discoveries is the mysterious Black Tomb, which was uncovered in Alexandria. Alexandria was one of the most prominent cities of the ancient world, named after the infamous conqueror Alexander the Great of Macedonia. Near the city is also the old site of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, which has since been built over with a fort. What makes the Black Tomb especially intriguing is that it was initially thought that it could contain the remains of Alexander the Great himself, or even a deadly curse. Unfortunately, experts unsealed it very recently, and no curses were discovered. Instead, inside the black granite sarcophagus, researchers found 3 skeletons and something that looked a lot like red sewage water. They also discovered a very horrible stench the moment they opened the lid. According to an article from the BBC, the stench was so horrible that the researchers had to vacate the area and go back later with the help from Egyptian military engineers. The 3 skeletons inside of the sarcophagus were likely part of a family burial, but the remains were not very well mummified. In fact, the inside of the sarcophagus looked more like a witch's disgusting soup than any normal coffin. Who exactly the skeletons were is still a mystery, and as of July 2018, the site has been cleared for fear that the sarcophagus was releasing lethal toxic fumes. Would you have recommended opening these tombs? I would have advised against it, or at least using X-ray technology to see what was inside before opening it. Let me know what you would have done in the comments below, then be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Just this week, there have been loads of amazing discoveries around the world, and you won't want to miss any of the reports. Giant Pharaoh Statue. Archaeologists never stop digging. An archaeological team just recently pieced together more than 6,000 individual fragments of a statue of King Psamtik I from the ancient city of Heliopolis, located in modern Cairo. It wasn't even found at a popular archaeological site. The statue was first uncovered in a working-class suburb in the city. Researchers first believed it was a depiction of Ramses II, one of the most famous rulers in Egyptian history. In fact, it was a minor disappointment when they found out who it really belonged to. Psamtik I was a less well-known pharaoh who ruled 6 centuries after Ramses II, from 664 BC to 610 BC. After piecing together all the fragments, researchers used 3D reconstruction to determine the original size and appearance of the statue. And this is incredibly exciting as the statue was about 26 feet 8 meters tall. That's enormous for an ancient statue. One of the reasons that this is such a surprising discovery is that ever since Ramses II, the statues made in ancient Egypt got smaller and smaller. It's incredibly rare to see such a big masterpiece from so late in Egyptian history. However, it should be no surprise to Egyptologists who know the story of this unique king. According to CNN, Psamtik I actually founded the Renaissance movement in Egypt and started a cultural revolution that included religion, art, and architecture. This is probably why his statue was so much bigger than those that came over the previous 600 years. Ushabti figurines. There have been a lot of amazing discoveries coming out of Saqqara, Egypt in recent years. There have been dozens of new mummies found, lots of new burial tombs, and so many shafts it would make anyone's jaw drop. But one of the cooler finds comes from 5 new limestone sarcophagi and 4 wooden coffins that were recently discovered in 2020. They were found inside of a burial shaft that stretched an amazing 27 feet below the ground. The shaft was discovered inside of a region of the city known as Sacred Animal Necropolis, and among the treasures found were hundreds of fantastic artifacts and figurines. There were approximately 365 Ushabti figurines discovered in this burial shaft. Some of the figures are inscribed with hieroglyphics that are still visible even after all these years. If you're not sure what exactly a Ushabti figurine is, it's a small statue that would be buried in an Egyptian grave to help the body in the afterlife. They were essentially little totems, but they weren't the only artifacts found. Inside the burial shaft, there was also a small wooden obelisk painted with the figure Isis, who was the Egyptian god associated with rebirth. There were also depictions of Nephthys, the god of death. Excavations in this area have been going on since 2018 and are still active. It's one of the oldest sites in all of Egypt and is home to the Step Pyramid, which is believed to be the oldest pyramid in the entire world. It's located only 20 miles, 32 kilometers south of Cairo. Ancient coffins at Luxor. These excavations all took place in Egypt, so no one should be surprised to see even more mummies. 30 ancient coffins were discovered in 2019 at a site in Luxor, which at one point had been the ancient city of Thebes. According to CNN, Egyptian authorities revealed the striking contents of 30 ancient wooden coffins, most of which included mummies. While it was not broadcast a lot on the news, this was actually the biggest discovery in Egypt in over 100 years. It was also the first stash of coffins ever discovered by Egyptian researchers. This is because almost all the incredible finds in Egypt over the past few hundred years have been uncovered by foreign archaeological dig teams. The last giant discovery was in 1891, and it was orchestrated by foreigners. As you can imagine, the Egyptians are very proud of this newest discovery. They unveiled the 30 mummies in front of the impressive Hatshepsut temple in the Valley of the Kings. According to the reports, the coffins are believed to be around 3,000 years old. 26th Dynasty discovery. In May of 2020, an astonishing discovery was made by the Egyptian-Spanish Archaeological Mission. What they discovered was a unique cemetery that dates all the way back to the 26th dynasty, formerly known as El Sawi era of Egypt. They made the discovery in the Minya Governorate, a region of Egypt rich in archaeological history. The Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities has claimed the cemetery is very unique, as it is in a style not previously discovered. Some other ancient discoveries in the area include papyri that date back to Roman Egypt. In fact, it's been estimated that around 70% of all literary paper discovered in Egypt has come from this region, but not all the secrets have been revealed yet. This cemetery would have been active between 664 BC and 332 BC, and it's not the only one. Other excavations in the area have discovered Roman-era tombs with domed ceilings, Roman tombstones, and bronze coins. While this cemetery does not appear to contain anyone overly important, it does come from an important time in Egyptian history following a period of foreign rule by the ruthless Nubian 25th dynasty. It was during the 26th dynasty that Egypt was united, freed from Assyrian control, and brought back to prosperity. In case you didn't know, ancient Egypt had an extremely volatile history of being conquered, liberated, and then conquered again. Ramses II era discovery. In the Old Kingdom of Egypt, Memphis was the capital city. Today it's located just a few miles away from Giza. According to an announcement from the Supreme Council of Antiquities, a number of unique carved stone blocks have been discovered in the area that date back to the rule of Ramses II. The statues are made of pink and black granite, as well as some that are made of limestone. The excavation team also found limestone blocks that dated back to the Coptic era, which has led researchers to believe the blocks the Egyptians used to build a lot of their statues actually ended up being recycled in later eras. Another part of this discovery was a giant statue of Pharaoh Ramses II and some smaller statues that represented various deities. Included among the deities was the warrior goddess Sekhmet, who is often viewed as the protector of the pharaohs and was the deity who would lead them into warfare. Another deity that was discovered at this site was the sky goddess Hathor, who was the symbolic mother to the pharaohs. And finally, a statue of Ptah was also discovered nearby. Ptah was seen as the god of creation and existed before any other thing in the universe. The excavation is still going on at the site as of July 2020, and it's expected that even more amazing relics will be discovered. If you want a bit of background on Ramses II, he was by far the most powerful pharaoh of the 19th dynasty and the New Kingdom. He was also one of the longest living monarchs in Egyptian history. During his long reign, Ramses II focused on leaving a massive legacy behind, which consisted of many cities, temples, and monuments. It's believed that he ruled Egypt between 1279 BC and 1213 BC. The world's oldest papyrus. This is one of the most amazing discoveries ever made in Egypt. It all began with some handwritten notes from an English traveler in the 19th century and some documents from two French pilots in the 1950s. Using these notes, Pierre Tallet made an unbelievable discovery. According to Smithsonian Magazine, he found a set of 30 caves inside some limestone hills in a very remote part of the Egyptian desert. These hills were miles inland, very far from the Red Sea and very far from any ancient or modern city. The caves had been sealed and hidden completely from view. If not for the documentation of the pilots and the old English traveler, nobody would have ever found these caves. The first digging session was in 2011, in which it became apparent that the caves had been used as a boat storage during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. That's around 4,600 years ago. Then during the third digging session just recently, an entire collection of papyrus was found almost completely intact, written in hieroglyphics and written in hieratic, which was the cursive script that the ancient Egyptians used. After decoding the writing, it became clear that this discovery was incredible. It was a handwritten journal of a man who had been around during the construction of the Great Pyramid, which of course is a tomb for the mighty pharaoh Khufu. The journal tells of the man's journey across Egypt while he made all kinds of deliveries, and it outlines everything researchers have ever wanted to know about ancient Egypt in that time, including where the stone came from for the pyramids and even the political situation at the time. The wealth of knowledge inside the journal is fantastic. Snake cult. Rare footage has just been released of an ancient Egyptian funeral home thanks to National Geographic. In the video, you can very clearly see the burial complex, which is located beneath the desert sands about 20 miles, 32 kilometers away from Cairo. Estimates place the funeral home and burial complex at being operational in 600 BC. The site has allowed researchers to discover more about the business side of embalming and mummification, and it turns out mummification was actually a very serious and lucrative business. The sarcophagi found inside the underground burial complex linked to the funeral home revealed sarcophagi completely sealed for 2,600 years. In this complex, archaeologists also discovered the first gilded silver mummy mask since 1939. But the weirdest part is the snake cult. Inside the complex, researchers discovered evidence of a previously unknown cult dedicated to a snake goddess. They were known as priests of Neosheus, and up until now nobody had known that they existed. Even with the discovery, very little is known about the cultists. It makes you wonder just what kind of craziness was going on behind the scenes in ancient Egypt that even our best researchers still don't know about. Hunt for Cleopatra. A recently made discovery in Egypt is offering clues as to the current whereabouts of Cleopatra's tomb. Cleopatra is undoubtedly the most famous ancient queen to have ever lived. She has been immortalized throughout the ages as a beautiful and intelligent leader and is still well known today in popular culture. But despite all of Cleopatra's fame, nobody to this day knows where her tomb is hidden. Some people believe it was buried in Alexandria, where she ruled from her royal palace, which tumbled into the ocean after the Great Tsunami of 365 AD. Others think her final resting place could be in the ancient temple of Taposiris Magna, just a few miles away from Alexandria. A recent discovery of two high-status mummies who lived during the time of Cleopatra might actually shed some light on where exactly her resting place sits. According to The Guardian, this discovery is being described as sensational because the necropolis where the two mummies were found is being linked to Cleopatra. Evidence suggests the two mummies were initially buried completely covered with expensive gold leaf. This was a luxury only given to the very top tier of society. This means the two individuals probably knew Cleopatra herself and could have played some pivotal role in her kingdom. Because this discovery happened at one of the probable sites for Cleopatra's tomb in Taposiris Magna, researchers are starting to suspect that somewhere in that general area, Cleopatra is still mummified inside her tomb. We could be months away from finally uncovering the legendary tomb of the Queen of Egypt. Do you think we will ever find her tomb? What is your favorite discovery from ancient Egypt? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks as always for watching, and see you again soon for another awesome video. From one of the most impressive dinosaurs ever found to the latest discovery of extraterrestrial life, here are 10 incredible recent discoveries. Stegosaurus bones. In Morocco, a new species of Stegosaurus has been uncovered. Scientists are believing that this dinosaur dates back to around 168 million years ago during the Jurassic period. Everyone knows and adores the Stegosaurus. It's one of the most popular dinosaurs next to the T-Rex, and British scientists are now believing that the new species discovered in 2019 is the oldest of its kind. In case you need a bit of extra info on the Stegosaurus, it's an armored dinosaur recognizable because of its armor-plated bones and the spikes on its tail. Even though the specimen found in Morocco only contained a few vertebrae, scientists managed to conclude it is indeed a new species. The researchers gave it a very long and confusing name that there's no way I can repeat, but in the local Berber language, it translates to mountain lizard, and that's kind of what a Stegosaurus looks like, a great big armored mountain lizard that can eat you. Interestingly enough, this is also the first Stegosaurus to ever be found in North Africa. For you dinosaur lovers, this one's for you. Apparently, National Geographic has come out with a new documentary on what dinos looked like based on the technology we have today. Have you seen it? Let me know in the comments below. Alien life. A recent discovery from NASA could be life-changing. According to the chief over at NASA, scientists may be on the verge of finding real alien life. This is after groundbreaking research on Mars and Venus has placed us one step closer to answering the timeless question of whether we are alone in the universe or not. Scientists announced in September of 2020 that the presence of a very unique gas on Venus is hinting at the possibility of alien microbes being alive on the planet. This is coming just 2 years after the Mars Curiosity rover found evidence of complex organic material in the soil of the red planet. And now scientists are coming beginning to understand that there are other places in our solar system where life could be lurking. Another great possibility is Saturn's moon. While the life discovered is tiny and microbial, that is the exact type of life that we developed from in the first place. That means that perhaps in 500 million years there could be small animals and insects crawling around on Venus or even on Mars. It also means that with a little bit of a push, these planets could probably sustain life much better than we previously thought. Do you think there is life on other planets? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell if you are new here. We have lots more videos like this. 250,000-year-old teeth. There has been a rather sensational discovery in Siberia just recently. This happened in October of 2020 when researchers discovered teeth inside of a cave in Siberia that date back 250,000 years. There were actually 2 milk teeth and 1 molar found in the cave. The team from the Novosibirsk Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography were digging in the lowest layers of the cave when they found the teeth. But what's even stranger is that the 2 milk teeth were 250,000 years old, but the molar found nearby only dates back to 170,000 years. According to the researchers, both teeth belong to an extinct group of ancient humans known as Denisovans who lived across much of Asia. But the story gets weirder and weirder. Siberian scientists also discovered a tiny finger bone that they believe belonged to a female who had lived inside that cave around 41,000 years ago. The finger bone went through analysis, and it was then revealed that she was a Neanderthal and very closely related to a modern human. But the real story here is that people, at least ancient people, had been living in that cave for around 250,000 years. To make this a little clearer, we started out as cave people, lived inside of a cave in Siberia for almost 210,000 years, crawled out of it just 40,000 years ago, only figured out how to farm around 10,000 years ago, and just figured out how to fly planes 100 years ago. Just let the incredible scale of our evolution sink in there for a minute. New species of electric eels. Just recently, a fish detective has uncovered a new species of electric eel. Love them or hate them, electric eels are absolutely fascinating. They have unique electrical organs inside their bodies that allow them to produce an electric shock when threatened. But yeah, they are pretty ugly. In any case, a Smithsonian researcher and self-proclaimed fish detective found 2 new species of electric eels after spending years in the Amazon rainforest studying and documenting the creatures. What's interesting about this discovery is that most scientists thought we had already discovered all the electric eels in existence, but the fish detective proved them wrong. The new eels are not specifically interesting, they're just electric eels, just slightly different from each other. It is fascinating that this one guy stood in the middle of the jungle for 12 or 16 hours at a time just to study and document the fish. In fact, the researcher plans to continue all the way into 2022. The doctor and his team are trying to identify the range of voltages produced by the new eel species. They want to sequence the entire genome of electric eels so that they can better study the animal's ecology and behavior. Terrifying mosquitoes. If you live in an area thick with mosquitoes, you know how awful they are. If you've ever been to Africa, many parts of Asia, or in any jungle anywhere, you will know how terrifying mosquitoes really are. But a recent discovery is saying that mosquitoes are actually more terrifying than we have ever known. Yes, they are responsible for more deaths than any war ever thanks to their ability to spread disease, but it actually turns out, according to a study published in Nature, that mosquitoes which carry malaria actually use the wind to travel extremely long distances and escape the harsh and brutal conditions of the desert. This may not sound alarming, but it absolutely is. Smithsonian researchers analyzed thousands of mosquitoes caught by using sticky panels and helium balloons, and they found that many of the infected mosquitoes had traveled hundreds of miles by simply riding on the wind. This means that as wind patterns change, mosquitoes infected with malaria can end up in places that they have not been before. If you've been enjoying your European summer free of mosquitoes, just wait until the winds from the Sahara dump 10 million mosquitoes with malaria in the center of Prague. That will really spice things up a bit. Of course, that's an exaggerated example, but the point is that the scourge of the mosquitoes is far more mobile than we previously thought. The good news is that by studying how they move, we may be able to prevent a future outbreak. Ancient human migration. Arguably the most interesting point in human existence was when we turned from nomads into farmers. The movement of our ancient human ancestors through Asia and especially through North America was a crucial time for humanity. If we had never crossed from eastern Siberia and migrated into North America, or even if we had just shown up a few years too late, Christopher Columbus would have arrived in America to find it completely empty. It would have actually been a new world. A recent discovery is shedding some light on human movements across the globe around 8,000 years ago. By studying ancient DNA, researchers have identified a complex pattern of human migrations, both eastward and westward. By mapping out how the ancient humans moved across the globe, especially when they were on the brink of farming, we can learn a lot about our own backgrounds. Basically, the movement of humans during the advent of farming resulted in a diverse genetic gradient across all of the globe that can still be seen today. To put it as simply as possible, this new research is showing that not only was there a huge population movement from Eurasia into Europe in the 3rd millennium, which spread Indo-European languages, but there was also a great migration from the steppe in Central Asia to South Asia. This basically shows the exact moment when humanity split between Europe and Asia, with one group migrating west and the other migrating south. Potential alien planets. Let's move off our planet again for the next discovery. In 2019, 2 alien planets were found surrounding a nearby star that could potentially be very similar to Earth. This is not great news for us right now, as there's not much we can do about it, but in a few hundred years, if we ever start branching out into the solar system, we are going to need these types of possibly inhabitable planets, and researchers just found 2 more of them. They are actually located pretty close, all things considered. The planets are orbiting a sun known as Teegarden's star, which is only about 12.5 light years from us. That's only 6 trillion miles. According to an article from Space, the 2 planets resemble the 2 inner planets of our own solar system. They're only a little heavier than Earth and are still in the habitable zone. Just like Earth and Mars, this means that there could be water in a liquid form on the surface of one of these planets. This news comes from part of a special research team who searches for exoplanets using incredibly advanced technology. The only issue with these 2 newly discovered planets is that the star they orbit produces less light and less energy than our own sun. This could make it very hard to get a good tan if we ever end up moving 12.5 light years from Earth. It also means that the planet would have to be closer to the sun and that each orbit around the sun would be much shorter. Imagine if the sun was as close as the moon and every day was only 16 or 18 hours. These are the kinds of challenges we will face when landing on new planets. African swine fever. In October 2020, 3 cases of African swine fever were discovered in wild boar in the east of Germany. This is not a fun or exciting discovery, it's actually pretty scary, and you won't hear many people talking about it. This newest batch of African swine fever cases brings the total to 53 since the Germans found the first one in early September. The only good thing is that all of the cases of African swine fever were found in wild animals and not in farm animals, but that did not stop China from actually banning the import of German pork in September after the first case was confirmed. That should be extremely alarming to anyone. The only good news is that this disease is not dangerous to humans, it is only fatal to pigs, but a massive outbreak could potentially destroy the pork supply for the world. Another risk, obviously, when it comes to an animal disease is that it somehow mutates and then does become harmful to humans. The fact that in a single month there have been confirmed 53 cases discovered of African swine fever in wild animals in Germany is not something to snort about. If you're watching this video down the road in 2021 and are wondering why pork is so expensive, this discovery could have something to do with it. Humans stopped the Ice Age. It's incredible that in 2020 people still don't believe in global warming. It's even more incredible considering the recent discovery that the Ice Age has actually been delayed thanks to humans by around 100,000 years. The effects of global warming around the world are so severe that we have not only stopped the incoming Ice Age, but have delayed it inevitably. In a report by CNN, they say that researchers are suggesting that humans have interfered so significantly with the natural carbon balance of the planet that the next glacial cycle is not coming anytime soon. Scientists in Germany recently found that the last 8 ice ages on Earth are all able to be explained by a relationship between solar radiation hitting the surface of the Earth and CO2 concentrations in our atmosphere. By using that information, scientists were able to predict the future of glacial cycles, also known as ice ages. The takeaway from this discovery is that by burning fossil fuels over the past 100 years, we have affected the climate of the planet for the next 100,000 years. There's actually no reversing it at this point. To put this in some perspective, it usually takes around 10,000 years or more for the planet to cool enough to usher in a brief ice age of a few thousand years. But in just 1 century, we have heated the planet so much that there is no chance of an ice age happening again until probably people are extinct or living on Mars. Beaked whale. Everyone loves a new species discovery. It's definitely a lot more fun than discoveries of diseases and pollution. Off the coast of Hokkaido in Japan, a new species of beaked whale has been confirmed. Beaked whales are nothing new to Japan. Whalers have known about them for years. However, a research group managed by Hokkaido University collected 6 unidentified specimens along the coast of the Okhotsk Sea. It became apparent that they were dealing with a new species. The new whales that they discovered looked much like the old beaked whales already familiar to the locals, but they had different external characteristics that were quite noticeable, like the proportions of their body and their color. They had shorter beaks, smaller bodies, and a darker color compared to the already known species. This prompted a study which eventually yielded the results, which were published in the journal Scientific Reports. It turned out that yes, the researchers had stumbled upon a totally new species of beaked whale, which they then named B. minimus because of its smaller body. While this may sound like a great big boring story, it's actually pretty interesting considering how large these whales are and how little we know about them. For example, the leader of the research team says that they still don't know what an adult female beaked whale looks like. The whales live extremely deep in the ocean, and because of this, they are very difficult to spot. At the end of the day, the point is that scientists are still discovering a variety of different ocean species, even today. Which of these discoveries is the most exciting, or the scariest? Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Come back soon for another exciting video.